Hi viewers, hope you are fine. Get off the tarmac, lady. The voice cut through the freezing morning air like a blade. For a second, every mechanic, officer, and ground crew member nearby stopped moving. Even the engines humming behind me suddenly felt distant. I slowly turned around. The young pilot standing a few feet away looked irritated, almost offended by my presence. His jaw was tight beneath his polished cap, and his eyes carried the kind of arrogance only youth and quick success can create. You can't stand here, he snapped again. This area is restricted. I looked down at my plain gray coat, my old leather gloves, and the small duffel bag hanging from my shoulder. To him, I probably looked like someone's lost grandmother who had wandered onto the military base by mistake. And honestly, maybe that was exactly what I wanted. I gave him a calm smile. I know where I am, I said softly. But he didn't listen. Ma'am, I'm serious. Move before security removes you. The cold wind brushed across my silver hair as I stared at the fighter jet behind him. My chest tightened with memories I had spent decades trying to bury. Because 40 years earlier, I had flown those same skies. Back then, people knew my name. Back then, men twice my age stood when I entered a briefing room. But time has a cruel way of erasing women like me, especially in places built by men who never wanted us there in the first place. The young pilot stepped closer. You deaf or something? He muttered under his breath. That was the moment I noticed the patch on his uniform. Falcon Squadron. My squadron. My heart skipped painfully. I had returned to this base after 37 years because of a letter. A simple white envelope stamped with military insignia. Commander Elizabeth Andrews, your presence is requested for Falcon Squadron's anniversary ceremony. No explanation, no details, just a date. At first, I almost threw the letter away. After all these years, why would they suddenly remember me? The same people who once erased my records, who buried my achievements beneath silence, who let another man take credit for missions I led, but something inside me refused to ignore it. So I came, not for medals, not for apologies. I came because some wounds never truly close. The young pilot folded his arms impatiently. Last warning. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, another voice echoed across the runway. What exactly is going on here? The atmosphere changed instantly. Every person nearby straightened. A black military vehicle had stopped beside us, and out stepped Squadron Leader Daniel Mercer. Tall, sharp-eyed, respected across the entire Air Force. The young pilot immediately saluted. Sir, this civilian entered the restricted zone, but Mercer wasn't looking at him anymore. He was staring at me. And the moment recognition hit his face, all the color disappeared from the young pilot's expression. Mercer took one slow step forward, then another, until he stood directly beside me. The silence became unbearable. Finally, the squadron leader looked at the pilot and spoke 6 words that changed everything. Do you know who she is? Conflict and betrayal. The young pilot's confidence vanished instantly. His eyes moved nervously between me and squadron leader Mercer. No, sir, he answered quietly. Mercer inhaled slowly, almost like he was controlling his anger. This woman, he said carefully, trained half the combat instructors in this division. The pilot's face drained completely. I could see embarrassment settling into his posture, but strangely, I felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion, because respect arriving 40 years late doesn't heal what was destroyed. Mercer turned toward me. Commander Andrews, he said gently, it's an honor to finally meet you. Commander. I hadn't heard that title spoken aloud in decades. Not since the investigation, not since the betrayal, not since the mission that changed my entire life. Mercer escorted me toward the main building while stunned officers whispered behind us. The walls inside the base were covered with framed photographs, medals, and squadron history. But as my eyes moved across them, I noticed something painful. My picture wasn't there. Not one photograph, not one mention. It was as if I had never existed. Mercer noticed my expression. We've been trying to correct that, he admitted quietly. I stopped walking. Trying? I repeated. His silence told me everything. Some people still wanted me forgotten. And I already knew exactly who. Colonel Richard Hale, the man who once called me the future of military aviation. The same man who later destroyed my career to save his own reputation. 40 years earlier, I was Falcon Squadron's lead tactical pilot. I had broken records, survived impossible missions, and earned respect the hard way. But respect from soldiers is very different from acceptance from powerful men. Colonel Hale hated how quickly I rose through the ranks. He smiled in public, but behind closed doors, he questioned every decision I made. Then came Operation Nightfall, a classified mission near hostile territory. Everything went wrong within minutes. Communication systems failed, our formation scattered, one of the jets was hit, and Hale froze. Even now, I still remember his terrified voice over the radio. What do we do? Men's lives depended on immediate action. So I took command. I redirected the squadron, navigated through enemy fire, and brought every surviving pilot home alive. Every single one. But when the investigation began, Hale changed the story. According to official records, he had led the rescue. And I had supposedly disobeyed direct orders. The military needed a hero. And back then, they refused to let that hero be a woman. So Hale received medals, promotions, interviews, and I received silence. Eventually, they pushed me into retirement so quietly it felt like I had disappeared while still breathing. Mercer listened carefully as I told him everything. His expression darkened. I read fragments of the reports, he admitted. But the files were heavily restricted. Restricted? I laughed bitterly. No, buried. That evening, the anniversary ceremony filled the massive aircraft hangar with officers, veterans, reporters, and decorated pilots. And standing near the stage, wearing medals across his chest, was Colonel Richard Hale. Older now, weaker, but still carrying the same poisonous pride in his eyes. When he noticed me entering the room, his face tightened instantly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he forced a smile. "Elizabeth," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." I smiled back calmly. "Funny," I replied. I was thinking the same thing. The tension between us could have shattered glass. But what Hale didn't know was that someone inside the military had finally uncovered the original mission recordings from Operation Nightfall, and before the night ended, everyone would hear the truth. Ending, revenge, climax and moral. The ceremony began with applause, speeches, and polished stories about bravery and sacrifice. I sat quietly in the front row while Hale stood proudly on stage, soaking in admiration that never truly belonged to him. Then Squadron Leader Mercer approached the microphone. His voice was steady. "Tonight," he announced, "we honor Falcon Squadron's legacy. But before we continue, there is a piece of history that must finally be corrected." The room grew still. Hale's smile faded slightly. Mercer nodded toward the control booth. A second later, old radio audio crackled through the massive hangar speakers. Static filled the room. Then panic. Voices shouting. Jets roaring. And suddenly, Hale's terrified voice echoed across the room. "We're losing formation. Somebody take command." A painful silence followed. Then another voice came through the speakers. My voice. Calm. Focused. Strong. "All units, follow my lead. Stay low and maintain formation. I'll guide you home." The room froze. Every officer, every reporter, every pilot, listening to the truth buried for 4 decades. The recording continued as I directed the squadron through enemy fire, rerouted damaged aircraft, and coordinated the rescue mission that saved multiple lives. By the time the audio ended, nobody was looking at Hale anymore. They were staring at me. Hale's hands trembled visibly. "This is out of context," he muttered weakly. But Mercer stepped forward immediately. "No, Colonel," he said firmly. "It's the full context." For the first time in 40 years, Richard Hale had nowhere left to hide. The reporters rushed toward him with questions. Veterans whispered angrily. Some officers looked disgusted, others looked ashamed, and strangely, I felt nothing. No triumph, no revenge, just peace. Because revenge doesn't always come from destroying someone. Sometimes it comes from surviving long enough for the truth to finally speak. Mercer turned toward the audience once the chaos settled. "Commander Elizabeth Andrews," he announced proudly, "was the true leader of Operation Nightfall." The entire hangar rose to its feet. The applause was overwhelming, not loud because of pity, Loud because truth had finally broken through decades of silence. I stood there frozen for a moment as tears filled my eyes. Not because I needed their validation anymore, but because somewhere deep inside me, the young woman who had been erased all those years ago was finally being seen. Again, later that night, as I prepared to leave the base, the young pilot from the runway approached me nervously. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. I smiled gently. "You judged too quickly," I replied. He lowered his head. "I won't make that mistake again." I looked back at the runway one final time. At the jets, the lights, the endless sky above them. And I realized something important. Time can bury the truth. People can rewrite history. And betrayal can destroy entire lives. But truth has patience. Eventually, it always finds its way home.